You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. LSU, of course, I'm sure by now most everybody's heard the gigantic news. LSU fires 4 defensive staffers today, including Matt House, along with Kerry Cooks, Robert Steeples, and Jimmy Lindsey. So massive turnover there on the defensive side of the ball. The 2 on-field assistants who remain with the staff are John Jancic and Bob Diaco. It'll be interesting to see how Brian Kelly pieces together the on-field staff. And remember, you have 10 full-time assistants, but remember on the offensive side, you've still got to replace Mike Denbrock as the offensive coordinator. And Denbrock also coached your tight ends. So depending on who you hire to be your OC, could affect how many assistants you may be able to hire on either side of the ball or how you make this work. What I mean is, for example, Joe Sloan's your quarterback's coach. If you don't promote Sloan, does your OC hire coach tight ends, or do you bring in a tight ends coach? If you bring in a tight ends coach and an OC, that's losing 1 offensive assistant but adding 2. Well, that means you've got to lose a defensive assistant somewhere. Is it Diaco or Jancic going back off field, or do you hire 1 fewer? Like, if you bring in Corey Raymond, do you only bring in Corey and let him handle the entire defensive backfield? Or do you split those duties and maybe Bob Diaco goes back to an off-field role and John Jancic goes to the role that he was meant to coach last year with outside linebackers? That's just some of the pieces on the chessboard that Brian Kelly and his staff, or that Brian Kelly's going to have to figure out how he organizes his staff here in this offseason. With all the coaching news happening today, it has overshadowed a little bit what happened Tuesday, which is that the transfer portal window closed, and there were a couple of notable announcements there as they came down the home stretch. Really one coming and one going. So let's take them in that order. Austin Ausberry is going to be an LSU Tiger. I think everybody knows Austin is a legacy. This is our Verge Ausberry's oldest son. Verge, as everybody knows, not only played at LSU, but has been a longtime LSU athletics administrator. And Austin played at U High and then went to Auburn. He was part of the class of 2022. So he just finished up his second season at Auburn, redshirted his first season, played in 3 games this year there on the Plains under Hugh Freeze. Was a cornerback in high school, transitioned to play safety at Auburn, but never really cracked the rotation or made an impact there. But it's an interesting one because you were so bad at safety this year. You had to add bodies there. And now you've added 2. Jordan Gilbert had already committed from Texas A&M, and now you've got Austin Ausberry. And I'm telling you, Austin Ausberry may not have played a lot of football at Auburn. Redshirt as a freshman, played in just 3 games this year. But as a prospect, he was a 4-star. On 3 had him as the number 258 overall prospect in the country. ESPN had him nationally as number 206. Rivals had him as the 101st best prospect in the country. So he was a highly touted guy coming out of U High, but projected more as a safety, and he's more talented than anybody you had at safety this year. Now, you were bad there, and I'm not telling you Austin Ausberry comes in as an All-American. I mean, I think Jordan Gilbert has the higher upside, has played more football. He's a year older than Austin Ausberry as well. But Gilbert and Ausberry are a better tandem than Major Burns, Andre Sam, and I don't even think that's close. Now, as you look toward next year at safety, you have Gilbert coming in, who is and what's interesting is Gilbert and Ausberry were teammates at U High. Now, Gilbert was a year older. He was in the signing class of 2021. Ausberry was a year later in 2022. But yet, U High teammates that are now transferring from their SEC schools back home to play at LSU, and they'll play in the secondary together. So Gilbert and Ausberry coming in, and then you've also got Deshaun McBride. McBride's one of the highest rated prospects in this year's class for LSU. Depending on what scouting service you look at, one of the top consensus top 3-4 players in the state this season, and he is a really good athlete. So freshman coming in, but a really, really good athlete. So Gilbert, Ausberry, and McBride coming in, 2 transfers and a freshman. When you look at who you have coming back, look, Major Burns has 1 more year of eligibility. He's got a decision to make. Does he come back? Does he go pro? He's been injured a lot during his career, and to be very honest, he's more of a downhill player that can, tackle and make plays around the line, but he is not very good in coverage. So I don't even know that Major Burns would be one of your best options next year. Javian Toviano played corner this year really out of necessity. But when he was here last year in the spring, he was a pretty versatile guy that they moved around a bunch. They played him at corner. They played him at nickel. They played him at dime. They played him at safety. So Toviano is someone that maybe if you're able to fortify the cornerback position, maybe Toviano is a guy that, that could move back to safety or could play like that dime role, that nickel role that Greg Brooks played so effectively, that Sage Ryan's probably a better spot in. Sage Ryan is another guy worth mentioning as well because he could move away from the cornerback position, so it could sort of fortify your safety spot. And then you had a lot of young guys that played this year with Ryan Yates and Kylan Jackson, and you have Matthew Langlois still around the program. Look, Yates played in all 13 games this year. He's out of Dallas and came from one of those football factory type schools. And then Kylan Jackson is from nearby Zachary, who has tremendous upside. But as Brian Kelly said about Kylan Jackson, just needed some. First of all, he had to get healthy. He was injured in fall camp and needed to mature a little bit. But once they get him on the field, they really like it. So your safety position is looking better as far as your depth, your talent, your ability, your upside. It looks far better than this year. Look, you rolled out Andre Sam almost out of necessity. A guy who played a lot, but was just not suited for this level of football to play at a high level. Losing Greg Brooks hurts you in so many ways because his ability to communicate. He was your best defensive back. Greg Brooks was your best defensive back. And in a unit that struggled so bad, you really sort of cut off the head of the snake there because he was your communicator. You should be better there. So, Austin Ausberry coming into LSU's defensive backfield. It's another safety they've added transferring in from Auburn. And really cool, just, on a personal level, for that being Verge's son coming back home and playing at LSU. That's really cool for Verge and for that family. And I'm sure for Austin as well, who obviously grew up watching LSU and grew up on campus, essentially. The other news out of the portal, which came on Tuesday night, is Jalen Brown, the freshman wide receiver from Miami, is leaving LSU. Hayes Fawcett on 3 had the news last night, as basically every prospect. Hayes Fawcett knows everything about recruiting before anybody else does because he does all the edits for everybody. So all these kids go to Hayes. He does their edits, so he knows the answers before anybody else. But I hate this because Jalen Brown in fall camp, when we got to go watch practice, you could just tell, man, he oozes potential and talent. It just really sucks because the path to the field for a wide receiver at LSU isn't very clear. There was a log jam this year. You had 2 potential first-round picks with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. Kyron Lacey was your number 3. Aaron Anderson, who was a 5-star, was your number 4. Only then do you start talking about Shelton Sampson and Jalen Brown and Kyle Parker and Kai Prion. So you're losing Neighbors and Thomas, but you're bringing back Kyron Lacey. You're bringing back Chris Hilton. You're bringing back Aaron Anderson. And then you went and got Xavion Thomas out of the portal. So at best, Jalen Brown is your 5th receiver if he emerges ahead of Kyle Parker and Shelton Sampson. So I get it. Yeah, it's tough. You're from Miami. You're a highly regarded guy, top 75 player in the country. And boy, he looked the part. He made some really great catches in fall camp. But I also understand you were patient. You waited your turn, your freshman season. And now you look ahead of you. Kyron Lacey's coming back. Chris Hilton's coming back. Aaron Anderson's coming back. And then they go get Xavion Thomas out of the portal. Without Xavion Thomas, maybe Jalen Brown comes back, because you could see a way, if you play a different position than Aaron Anderson and you're behind Lacey and Hilton, you could emerge. You could be awesome. Like, you could go compete and win a job. But with Lacey, Hilton, and Anderson Thomas, it's really hard to see a path for a guy like Jalen Brown, or even Kyle Parker for that matter, making a big impact in 2024. Probably have to wait. So Jalen Brown, another guy from that 2023 class, hits the transfer portal, joining Lance Hurd this week and hitting the transfer portal before that deadline hit. So Austin Ausberry in, Jalen Brown out. Now for LSU, for Brian Kelly, the focus shifts to, with the portal closed, who is in the portal? What positions do you still need to address? And obviously there's a spring portal window as well, so we'll have a much better sense on that when the spring comes. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.